Welcome to Happy Times and Places, a positively inclined Doctor Who episode commentary podcast in which I, Toby Haydock, watch a Doctor Who story chosen by a friend of mine, commentating and dropping in facts and observations, and all the while trying to guess what my special guest's favourite thing about each episode might be.
Thank you, Toby, for asking me to come and speak to you about my favourite things regarding the Ark. My name's Mark Aldridge and I'm Associate Professor of Screen Histories at Solent University in Southampton, and obviously a big Doctor Who fan, as most people who love screen histories tend to be.
Well, I've gathered you all here today after I've just eaten a sausage roll that actually had neither sausage nor roll in it. It's a vegan sausage roll. Shez has been buried. I was just about to start and she delivered something to my booth door. But the roll, because she's gluten-free as well, so yeah, vegan, you have something different in the middle. I think it's got beetroot and lentils and things like that. But then the roll is a rice cake daubed with chickpea flour, which then when you bake it does become a bit pastry-like. So I've just had a sausage roll that had neither sausage nor roll in it. It's a bit like the other night when I had some alcohol-free cider, but cider being cider these days, it was I think it was strawberry and pear or something weird. But again, so it had neither apples nor alcohol in it, which would suggest to me it's not cider. It's basically not cider. And in fact, I think I should be able to sue. But anyway, this is definitely Doctor Who, but not necessarily as we know it or as it is usually, because Doctor Who is returning with his companions, Stephen and Dodo, to the scene of the adventure he is currently in, but not at the same time. Time travel shenanigans in the 60s. 60s timey-wiminess. Most unusual, and I'm delighted to say that, as well as special guest Mark Aldridge, who is the leading expert on all things Agatha Christie and has written books, and you should really avail yourself of as much of his work as you possibly can. The Patreons of Patronville have been reassessing and rediscovering and reigniting their love, or igniting a previously unfiery. Their love had not ignited, had not been ignited. So I have provided some petrol / Viagra, depending on which way you want this slightly tortuous metaphor to go, into their assessment and appreciation of the Ark. So David Gillespie Pratt says, it's such a shame that Purvis's courtroom scene, so everyone here is referring largely to episode 2. That's how it happens here, where I get the comments on episode 2 to lead us into episode 3. Sometimes people look forward. David Gillespie Pratt says, it's such a shame that Purvis's courtroom scene was used in an episode of Have I Got News For You, just to point and laugh at his performance. It's probably one of his best scenes. Kaplooey. It makes me go off comedy when people take stuff out of context and laugh at it, even good comedy. Not that I've seen Have I Got News For You for many years. It used to be appointment viewing. But it always happens to Martin Clunes, doesn't he? Because he's wearing that ridiculous costume, which is kind of the point. And they laugh at him in Snake Dance, in which he's actually really good, and it's an early part in his career, and he should be proud of it. It's not his fault that somebody's chosen a clip to do a bit of shorthand, and he has to be game and go, oh yeah, look at me. Whereas actually, I wish actors could be a bit bolder and go, actually, that was a really good show, and I was damn good in it, and it's better than this, which is essentially people sitting on a sofa mocking things out of context. But let me not get into that, because I will sound like a bitter old fool, and seeing as I can't even eat a sausage roll that has any of its actual descriptors in it, I'm hardly one to talk about people doing things that aren't what they should be. I'm very fond of the Ark, says David Gillespie Pratt. I first watched this on UK Gold in 1998, and the quality varied episode to episode, but I always liked the concept for it, and it feels big and expensive in a way the next story does not. The next story is, of course, The Celestial Toymaker, which is very, very studio-bound, isn't it? Anyway, I have the camera script loaded up and looking for some interesting facts. Oh, let's see what David comes up with. Frank Shales says, I wonder if the plastic sheeting, I referred to this last week, for Stephen's witness box was meant to indicate some rudimentary quarantine precautions, or whether it was just luck. The set design in this story has had a lot of thought put into it, and the painted backdrops are amazing in an imaginative scale. Just imagine how it would be done today in today's CGI age. We rarely get such ambition now, let alone then. I really think that's very true. I think Barry Newbury has played a blinder, and I must remember this when I'm thinking of the best things about the Ark, because the set design is superb. Jason Thompson says, and bear in mind that I'm actually pretty much even Stevens with Mark at the moment, so I have to take my choices very seriously. Jason Thompson says, it had to be the cliffhanger, referring to the fact that Mark Aldridge and I both chose the cliffhanger to the last episode. If either of you had chosen otherwise, I'd have had a few choice words for this comment section. It's superb and a great example of a cliffhanger that is a plot twist rather than an easily escaped moment of jeopardy. Absolutely. I gave it 10 out of 10 on my Mammoth Cliffhangers thread on Twitter in 2022. So I humbly direct you there, everyone. Your comment about the Season 3 acting honours made me think about who might be a contender for such an award. I think the top three surely have to be Frederick Yeager as Jano in The Savages, Anthony Jacobs as Doc Holliday in The Gunfighters, and Ivor Salter, who is having a whale of a time as Odysseus in The Mythmakers. Ooh, I might do an acting Oscars Indefinable Magic, because that'll be slightly easier to put together. Sometimes those essays are torturous. I'm working on one at the moment, and in fact it was supposed to be this week's release, and I've got bogged down in it, so it's taken longer than I would like. So I'm trying to think of ones that would be easy to write, and actually everyone likes a list, don't they? I sometimes think I overcomplicate things. So maybe I should do an acting Oscars for each era, maybe, and then maybe do a final. Season 3, well, I mean, Frederick Yeager is good as Jano. It's largely because of the Hartnell impression, but I think it would be a rum season if... No, season... Anthony Jacobs' Doc Holliday, I do think, is probably a contender. Ivor Salter is having a whale of a time, but he also doesn't know his lines. So he does a lot of this sort of, I'm gonna get to the end of my line and make it make sense sort of stuff. But he covers it with bluster because he's a vivid performer, and it is a great part. It's a fabulous part. I'm not, because certainly Jason Thompson, Kevin Stoney, I think undoubtedly gives the best performance in all of season 3 as Mavic Chen. I think Mavic Chen is one of the greatest performances of the 60s, and I'd venture to say in the whole history of Doctor Who. So Kevin Stoney, I would knock out one of those, probably Yeager. I also think actually Stephanie Bidmead does a lot with Marga in Galaxy 4, a lot more than is necessarily there. I think she has a great detachment about her, but suggesting that the depths beneath, because she is the only one who's not a clone. I think it's actually a clever performance. Peter Stevens as Cyril, I think, is fab. In fact, and all the supporting, Carmen Silvera and Campbell Singer are good because they both play lots of different parts. That's all. In Doctor Who Oscardom, that would probably be the equivalent of playing somebody with a disease or a disability in your actual Oscars. I think everyone's very good in The Massacre. Are there any standout? I mean, The Massacre, I think, is uniformly good, you see. I'd be tempted, if there's a sort of best supporting actor, to go for or best one episode actor. Barry Justice as the King in episode 3 is one of those actors that I think makes a great impression despite only being in one episode. So no, I would probably go in certain different directions from you, Jason. Certainly Kevin Stoney. Keith says, I went through a phase of describing everything with the prefix of security for a while. For example, the security fridge, the security wardrobe, etc., without explaining why to anyone. I can imagine it being extremely irritating at the time. Well, as somebody that's just eaten a security sausage roll, I agree with you, Keith. Jack Sharp says, I wonder if this story's twist would work better if it were two-parters and another story in the middle. But I suppose that would be impractical, both because they'd need to keep the sets around in storage for a month, and because you'd be expecting the audience to remember the first half when they've just spent 4 weeks in the Toymaker's domain playing hopscotch with Billy Bunter. Yeah, I do like the idea of returning after a gap, but actually I think it probably works better as we have it, because the the contrast is so stark and immediate, and that is unusual. The Doctor's been to Peladon later, with a massive gap. Actually, the fact that you see the gap immediately, I think, is part of what makes this unique in terms of how the show structures itself. So I understand that sort of logically, wouldn't it be if they did a bit more adventuring and then came back, that would feel less like a weird coincidence. But I think the fact that they do it immediately, you could say, oh well, the TARDIS has had a switch has sparked or something, so that's why they're in the same place but a different time. So it's more likely that it would happen immediately than not. And again, in terms of how the storytelling works, to leave the statue and then see it immediately 700 years later, I think is a big kaflooey. Alex Kafashoglu says, hi Alex. I saw Alex recently at the London Comic Con. Never been a huge fan of this one, but for this Happy Times and Places, I'm watching as you're supposed to, with the Ark on the telly and Toby in my ear. Good Lord, no pressure. Don't usually watch along, but I'm finding I'm enjoying the Ark more this time around. Oh, good. John Hall says, as far as I'm concerned, Toby, you win the point for episode 1. Well, in that case, it's 2-0 to me, John. Thanks. And Alex, you are doing the unusual thing, because I don't think many people do watch with the episode going along, which I don't know how I feel about that, obviously, because commentaries are designed to go along. But I listen to most commentaries, and in fact I listen to all commentaries without watching the episode, unless it's ones on your actual DVD and Blu-ray. But I can't listen to most of them anyway because I'm on them, so that would make me physically sick. Richard Bignell says, the dramatic end of this episode has always been one of my all-time favourites. This is episode 2, remember? The Ark seems to be channeling H.G. Wells in some of its storytelling. The common cold from War of the Worlds plays an important role in the story, albeit becoming the cause of the problem rather than the solution. But with the cliffhanger of episode 2, it also seems to be tapping into ideas of the time machine, with the travellers spinning into the far future, whilst the means of their conveyance remains in exactly the same locale. So the slow pan up to the statue is sublime. Well, and we will soon be meeting the Invisible Man as well, Richard. So yeah, H.G. Wells all over the place. Paul Dunn, hi Paul. Paul says, totally loving this Happy Times and Places. I love the Ark and think it's very underrated, whilst brimming with concepts, and the episode 2 cliffhanger is not what you're expecting, but thoroughly brilliant. I think this is undiluted Wiles tosh, and what we would have got earlier had they not been saddled with Masterplan. A total pleasure to see the wonderful Michael Sheard in his earliest Who. Am I right in thinking this is the earliest use of CSO in the series with the control room screen? I'm no expert, Paul, but our CSO, I think, has to be colour. It's colour separation overlay, and I think this is a process called inlay, which, I mean, I think we've had before. You know that's why the Daleks cross over the screen, don't they, in the chase, because it's not it's not fed in behind them or something. It's sort of plonked on the screen, so you can't cross it, and I think it's called in. Oh, hang on, Richard Bignell says it's not CSO. Here we go. I should read ahead. It's not CSO, says Richard Bignell, which requires colour cameras. Yes, because you're removing a colour and replacing that with the output of another camera. But inlay, yes, the first example of which we get in episode 1 of the Daleks, when they combine live action with the model of the Dalek city. Yes, they use inlay quite a lot. So, no, is the answer, Paul, but it's nice to have it pointed out that there is a lovely effect here. Nick Jocelyn Mellish. Oh, hi, Nick. This was the final complete story prior to Enemy of the World's recovery I ever saw as a child. Oh, interesting. We all have one of those. I bought the VHS when it came out, having somehow missed it twice on the UK Gold Repeats. I remember the twist really throwing me. I knew this was 4 episodes long, so something had to be up, but it still managed to surprise me. Yes, it goes south in the second half. Don't say that, Nick. That's where I'm about to go. But it's hardly alone in doing so. Heck, some stories do that mid-scene, though none of the others has a security kitchen to their name. I know the real winner here. I'm loving this affection for the Ark, but the consensus seems to be, lovely listener, that episodes 3 and 4 are like a sausage roll with no sausage. Although, well, no, because actually it was really, really tasty. So, yeah, they may well be, episodes 3 and 4 may well be on the Ark, but they are not the Ark that we are used to. It is a slightly different story because the monoids have found their voice. and things have slightly changed. All changed with the cast except the actors playing the monoids, but I'm sure we'll get into that. So we are going to return to the same place, but at a different time. And we are going to press play on the Ark, The Return, in 3, 2, 1. So I'm overjoyed that everyone watching along, or those who have commented at least, have found themselves enjoying this story, which, as I say, I've always found to be a little underrated. I think it's interesting. I think it's ambitious. I certainly think it's an excellent production, and would like one day to persuade Peter Purves that is the case. But here we are. They've returned to the Ark, which is such a brilliant device, isn't it? To show and actually, obviously, this model has been quite. It's nice to see a ceiling, isn't it? I know episode 1's called The Steel Sky, so it's all about ceilings. It's a very ceiling-oriented story, but that's such a good idea. How do we show that the human beings are no longer dominant? Well, we'll have the last bit of the statue, monocular, to suggest that the monoids are here. The monoids are in charge. Lovely high crane shot. I had a meeting about a forthcoming Doctor Who DVD documentary. Oh yes, we're still planning, folks. Blu-ray documentary. And we were talking about how, cranes used to be quite a big deal. It's nice seeing all these feet. I like the Doctor's shoes. I've seen the Doctor's shoes so gorgeously close up before. And we were talking about how now, people are rather blasé about high shots because they're done by drones, which is a lot easier than getting a crane. But the crane shot is used very well in this. And I think you'll be able to date documentaries from the 2020s and indeed Scandi dramas. They always seem to have a crane shot of somebody driving through a forest. And when I say Scandi dramas, I also mean then the British crime dramas that come 3 years later that have sort of copied them. Oh dear, what a parlous state we're in. So here we are. So Barry Numerous sets are definitely. Look at that. That's a wipe across there. That's, again, just a little. And what I like is the sort of lack of ceremony about how some of these effects are sort of thrown in. So this is the inlay that Paul was talking about. And that's a great touch. We don't quite know what's going on. This is Terence Woodfield, by the way, who has previously been Salation in the Daleks Master Plan. Not in episode 2. He's an extra called Ian East in that. But he, when Salation speaks later in Volcano, isn't it? And then episode 11, it's Terence Woodfield, who's also in The Tomorrow People. I mean, it's a bit nasty that you get shot in the elbow for knocking a pan off. But obviously we haven't seen that it's actually quite nice that we haven't seen the monoids, but we've just seen their arms. But the suggestion is there. And now we see it blatantly, that the monoids are the baddies and they've learnt to talk. Yeah, so that's... and the monoid voices are done by Roy Skelton, which means that their slightly zippy-esque echo is. Oh, I think I've just seen a cameraman in the background, or was it a waiting extra? Back left behind Hartnell. Anyway, the taller of the two humans there is Terence Baylor, who I have talked about very recently in Happy Times and Places, because he is Major Barrington in the War Games. He has 2 Doctor Who appearances, and both of them are single, like Barry Justice, whom I mentioned before earlier. He is a single episode contributor both times. Major Barrington is not seen in the War Games beyond episode 1, and Yendom, as Terry told me, he was such a sweet man, very quietly spoken. Actually, his Who's Round is slightly disappointing for me because we sat quite far apart, and I put the recorder as close to him as I possibly can, but he was very softly spoken, often played aristocrats and British officers, but was actually a sort of rural Kiwi. Who was good with his hands and had things that he'd made out of vegetable brushes and things like that in his home. Was he Wimbledon way? Anyway, I visited Terry and his wife Valerie Cutco, who's an actress. He was previously married to another actress, Bridget Armstrong, who is still around, and his daughter Lucy Baylor was a regular in EastEnders for a bit. But Terry was a lovely, lovely guy, and he came to see Moss Ain't My Doctor Who scarf in the West End, and I was very sad when he passed away, because we sort of kept in touch, unfailingly polite. Whenever I met him, he'd ring up afterwards and say thank you for a lovely time. He was unfailingly courteous. What a nice man. And he was bowled over that one of his last roles was in Harry Potter, because they all got proper American Screen Actors Guild contracts for those. So he's barely in Harry Potter, and he got paid an absolute bag of cash for it. So this is a lovely twist. I mean, this is because season 3 is so scantily represented in the archive. Had episode 3 of the Ark been its only surviving installment, we'd have had a clip from episode 2, which is always, I always think that about the Celestial Toymaker 1. If we get that back, we will get a clip from a missing episode, won't we? Because they show a clip in that. Anyway, let's not get into that. But it's the sort of thing I think about. In a universe where some episodes might not exist, we'd have a clip from a missing episode by dint of it appearing somewhere else. Anyway, I think they don't look like eyes where the mouth should be. They do look like eyes in the sort of centre of the forehead because of the way that they're done. I think that's quite good. And they get a lot of dialogue, don't they? So Roy Skelton and John Halstead, who I have met and interviewed. That interview hasn't been released yet. I was waiting to do something with the Ark. John Halstead, Ginger John, he was a regular in Emergency Ward 10, was it? John is extremely jolly and camp and fun. He's I'll let him speak for himself when you get the interview, but I really like John's company. He's a good lad. Haven't heard from him for a while though, actually. But yeah, and it's his only Doctor Who. He's done so much else, John. Including appearing in Top Boy. I mean, he's still around. But Monoid 1 gets a fair slice of the action, and the Monoid actors, Edmund Coulter and Frank George, we couldn't find for years. Then it turns out that Edmund Coulter, I think, was in America, and he died. And Frank George, I think, is a relative of Susan George, but I've never quite traced him. This is Brian Wright and Eileen Helsby, both of them still with us. Brian became a writer and script editor. His son is an actor called Philip Wright, who you recognise from things like Prime Suspect and Line of Duty, works quite a lot. And Eileen Helsby, her sister Thelma Helsby, was the director's assistant on that. She was the next-door neighbour, Thelma, of the actor Anthony Keach. So Eileen lives in America. Lots of people from the Ark ended up in America, because Edmund Coulter did. I think Ralph Carrigan, who's one of the Monoids, did as well. But Eileen Helsby here is a regular Charmian in Survivors, and she's in the Tomorrow the Rat episode of Doomwatch, so she does quite a lot. She's got a lovely quality to her voice, I think. I do think it's a bit much that they're just in their pants and with those things on. I mean, you must have been quite self-conscious wondering about, well, I suppose probably not. It's just like being in a bikini or swimming trunks, but I don't really want to be walking around in my swimming trunks on telly. Do you know what I mean? Obviously, anyway, we're in the security kitchen, which is rather fun. I do like the Monoid voices. They do have a slightly Zippy-esque quality about them. They are a sort of evil amalgam of Zippy and George, aren't they? But how in space could you do it is one of my favourite bad lines in Doctor Who. All you have to do to make bad science fiction is add the word space to something. Oh, well, I suppose add the word security to kitchen and add the word space to anything. So Marga has it in season 3 as well, doesn't she, in Galaxy 4, when her mission is to conquer space or something, and Terry Nation sticks space in front of everything. It's a bit like, I've mentioned this before, I'm sure, when Star Trek The Next Generation says, I'm going to have a sonic shower. You just say a shower. I don't say I'm going to go and have a water shower. You know what a shower is. I'm going to get clean. It's only because you're pointing out it's from space that you need to say the actual thing. It would be like me saying, I'm going to use my laser pencil. Whereas, of course, I'd just say pencil. Or, well, pen maybe, because I don't say I'm using my ink pen or my my lead pencil, you just go, I'm using my pen or my pencil. But if in the future we use laser pens or pencils, which of course we won't, we'll use keypads. But anyway, you get my drift. But but he wasn't using it to describe something, wasn't it? It wasn't space as an adjective. It was more space as a kind of exclamation. I love the potatoes. That is, although they could have been eyed a little bit better, but and the fact that the hands keep moving, they don't freeze or anything. The fact that they bung that effect in without any ceremony whatsoever to go, yeah, this is how we're going to make potatoes in space. You're just going to throw a pill in some water and it'll make potatoes. I get there's no reason for it to be there, but the art lies in the fact that it is there. So I love the space potatoes, and I might very cheekily choose those as my favourite thing of the episode, just because they're an example of the many things that I think Michael Imeson, it's the director again, does just to make this a memorable and interesting production. I mean, of course, there is an oversimplistic depiction of the monsters in that they go, right, well, we'll call ourselves 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, which is, it's seeing as later we have Scythe Man though and Head Man. It's no less sophisticated than the show gets later on. Everybody's dropping things, aren't they? I know she does that deliberately. Oh yes, this is slightly laboured, isn't it? But that's Royston Farrell. Oh, it's a little bit on film there for the gun. But that's Royston Farrell who gets killed there. He's the man in the Claws of Axos who says, boom. Which I think is his only credit in Doctor Who, but he's an extra, but also he's slightly stunty actually, Royston, which is presumably why he gets to fall over there. Because I hadn't realised this, because he was actually quite a sort of ordinary looking guy. He didn't look like he was an athlete like some of the Havoc boys, for example, but he was a bit martial arty and judo-y, but he looks like just a sort of guy. But yeah, he gets killed there, so that's maybe because of his judo-y background. He might have got an extra couple of quid for having a featured piece of the action. I think something's come off on Stephen's shirt there. They've had a bit of a fight, haven't they, with a monoid? I wonder if the monoid was still wet, or yeah, it's like the Merca. But something's come off on his shirt there, isn't it? That's the problem when you remaster things. It doesn't hide anything anymore. I don't mind. I like seeing everything clearly. They're shambling. I think because some of the monoids in this, there are a few more, aren't there, are supporting artists, so they won't have had as much time to rehearse as the actors playing the sort of featured monoids 1, 2, 3, and 4. I think they've managed their walk slightly better. The lot that we saw then shuffling off, I don't think they've had enough time to sort of negotiate how you walk without shuffling. I mean, they could have been really ambitious, couldn't they, and sort of made it look like they were gliding. And all of this, there's a lot of model work here, as well as the special effects, as well as the massive sets. And I don't think that's bad. I mean, it wobbles slightly, but it's I don't think that's bad. And again, it's being ambitious and showing it. And there's always an issue with scale when it comes to this sort of thing, of course. But you need to be able to see it in the way that the screen is, and it's harder in black and white as well. But I think that's pretty reasonable. I do feel sorry for the guys here who have to just sort of sit, although they are all sort of slightly leaning forward, aren't they, as if to suggest they're moving. Although they were also looking a bit kind of vacant. It was, yeah, I think that was quite a big ask of going, yeah, just kind of sit here until the door opens, with no move of camera angle. But I think it's pretty impressive that we see them go from the interior of the ship and straight to the exterior of the ship. That's an unobtrusively smart piece of action. I think the painted cyc at the back is not bad at all, though you can see the join in the middle of the mountain there if you look too closely. The jungle does look a bit, because of its use of cotton wool, there is a sort of essence of Varga plant about it. And here we are on film, because the Invisible People live on film. But this is all brilliant. I love Invisible Man. special effects in black and white telly, because it's amazing how good it often is. I remember seeing the first episode of the film series The Invisible Man, that Deborah Watling's in, and I was astonished for the time for how good the special effects are, let alone the movie, the Universal picture. There's some incredible special effects, and it's always sort of nifty trying to work out how it was done, and sort of being impressed about how seamless they can make it. It's a sort of it's a thing that was rather fun as a kid, because it was a sort of trope, if you like. It was a thing that some things did, and you go, how are they going to do the invisible? And you always knew you were colluding with them. I mean, it's always the case with Doctor Who, isn't it? You have to be generous to them. Oh, now I'm not going to be quite so generous with Monoid 2, the stupidest twat in the world. I don't think it's Oh, Geoffrey, I don't think it's going to take us very long to get the humans, because we're not bringing him. Oh, Zippy, don't tell him that we're not bringing the humans. And that's the way he goes, no. I just gave myself away. I mean, that is, I can see now, is odd for a story with such sophisticated ambition in a philosophical sense, and in its attempt to sort of stretch what Doctor Who does as a format and as a concept, that it then, particularly in these two episodes, goes, yeah, but we're quite happy to throw in some, what in space here, and I've put my scaly foot in it moments is but here we have now I did the poor old Monoid 2 having tripped over his excuses to Dodo. He tripped over the entrance there to the Refusion Castle. But again, we got lots of painted backdrops here. The castle was painted when we saw it, but that's viewers were used to that at the time. And yeah, the invisible effects being on film, you go, well, obviously we can make those as good as possible when we're doing it on film, but they do have to do some on videotape here. And I do like the idea of the Refusions fare much better in the book. There are more of them. There's a lady Refusion called Mary, isn't there? But we get a bit more into their psychology and their personalities, etc. Whereas here they're a bit disembodied voice, and of course, and again, there's a sort of glorious naivety about saying, how shall we show how evil the Monoids are? One of them will smash a vase and throw some flowers on the floor. They are almost heroic in their naffness, and it's all to contrive moments. So it's like the script writer, and I'm going to say singular because I suppose what Paul Erickson should have done was gone, yes, I wrote episodes 1 and 2 and Leslie wrote episode 3. That's what he should have said. And of course, if you want a godlike voice, Richard Beale, the wonderful Richard Beale, who we will see in the flesh very soon as Bat Masterson in The Gunfighters, who was a great servant to Doctor Who, and died when he was, I think, 96. Not that long ago. Oh, the flowers are on film, so we're suddenly back on film for a bit of invisible stuff, and that's worked very well, and that's fitted in very nicely. But Richard had a wonderful deep voice. He was quite a cantankerous fellow. We shared an agent for a while, but I enjoyed him, and I would have loved to have done a career interview with him. And he said, I agree, I've got plenty of interesting things to say, but I stupidly said it'd be like a radio program, but it would be put on the internet. And he said, I will have absolutely nothing to do with the internet. And when we did our sound check for I think I might have said this in the Gunfighters Happy Times and Places, for the Gunfighters, you say, what did you have for breakfast? People go, banana bread. That was Tristan de Villacole, I think. Nothing, or cereal. And Richard Beale said, I had a disgusting sausage roll on the train platform. I suspect Richard, from my brief, he was very entertaining, but I suspect he was a glass half empty sort of fella. Oh yes, because he sent his contract back saying In all my years as an actor, I have to say this is the worst contract I've ever read, and I've read thousands. But I didn't have to deal with any of that. I just had to enjoy that. But he's the voice of the propaganda in the Macra Terror, and he's the Minister of Ecology in the Green Death. So he pops in and out of Doctor Who. He's in the Tripods as well. He was a great friend of Michael Bryant's because he was a great man of the sea. Oh, look, Space Chicken. Beautiful. I'd forgotten about that. I'd remember. Interesting, I'd remembered the potatoes, but not the chicken. And here's, and I like the idea of the sort of Quisling, the collaborator, the subject guardians, and that's going to be something that is quite potent. Not less than 20 years. Well, no, just over 20 years after the war, where there were questions of, who's. Is somebody that helps, are they bad or are they cowardly or are some of them fifth columnists? There's all sorts of drama to be had from the person that goes over to the other side. Do they redeem themselves by doing something heroic? Is it that they're just not brave enough and it's not their fault? What would you do in that position? I think that's all very interesting, and it gives us this little plot device of. He's seen that there's going to be bad news for the humans, i.e. that the bomb is in the statue. And I like that the statue is not just there to facilitate that brilliant cliffhanger, but it actually becomes an important part of the plot. And again, that was a nice little thing there, wasn't it? Where just as the camera is panning beyond the chair, you just see it pulled so that the refusion can sit down. Now, obviously, it's a stagehand behind the chair, but because it's so sort of subtly done, it just adds to and it must be under the table, I would think there. But again, instead of going, oh, look at us moving the chair, it's just feeding it into the scene in a way that is very subtle, but adds to the illusion, which is what making good television is all about, is adding to the illusion. So yeah, that cotton wool's a bit Varga planty, isn't it? You have to be quite careful when you're doing jungles in Doctor Who, because I suspect some children with fevered imaginations would have gone, that's a Varga plant, because photos turned up relatively recently, didn't they, that showed that the Varga plants were spiky cotton wool. Yes, here you are, being very brave here. He's got a lovely voice, Terry Baylor, and it always amused him, he said, because he got a letter from a fan saying, please could you sign a photo of yourself as the doomed Yendom, and it always tickled him that poor old Yendom had sort of been given this appellation that he was doomed. So it's always a bit weird, this scene, because it feels like the scream has been put on afterwards, because he's dead by then, but also I think it's really weird that he's got his arms sticking out in the air and his leg up a la Pertwee, but it's quite an odd look at that weird sort of Richter-y death. It's a most unusual death. And they must have worked that out, but it's very odd that the scream is almost like it's been dubbed on afterwards. Here we go. This is pretty cool. Again, I like that it cuts from the inlay to the actual film. It's a nice little, again, it's just a nice little interesting visual. And we are on film here. This is film to make the invisible stuff work slightly better. But the refusions have blown up Monoid 2, which is frankly, he deserved that, because I think he's potentially the stupidest baddie to have ever been in Doctor Who, maybe. And so they've kind of had to insert a cliffhanger here. I wonder if the director at any point said, William, could you do that as though it was actually bad or dramatic? And he's gone, no, I'll just sort of do it quite casually. But it is the end of the episode. Yeah. And presumably the Doctor and Dodo are standing stock still while that sinks in order to have the closing captions. So yeah, Terry Baylor, lovely to see Terence Baylor. Brian Wright and Eileen Helsby stood out of yes, so the Ark was actually one which had a cast that, as I mentioned in parts 1 and 2, that stuck around for quite a long time, but sadly not enough of them were interviewed when they could have been. But yeah, so maybe I wonder if that's because they're quite a young cast, or I don't know. Or maybe not, it's not a cast of people who had great success, so they couldn't get pissed as often as really successful actors. Who knows? Well, no, because Terry Baylor was hugely successful. He is the man in the life of Brian who says, I'm Brian and so's my wife. And when they say, we are all individuals, he says, I'm not. So Terry, and he's Macduff in the Roman Polanski Macbeth, although he is dubbed in that, bizarrely. And he is also Leggy Mountbatten in the Ruttles. So Terry Baylor, what a lovely man he was, and what a spectacularly odd death scene he had with its dubbed scream and his arm sticking up in the air. Like, it's a thing we used to do when I was younger called the Dying Fly. Was that a dance from Tiswas? Maybe it was. That's just stirred a race memory somewhere in my darkest depths. So, what do I like about episode 3? Well, I was very impressed with the invisible effects, which I'd forgotten quite how impressive they were, and it's I think the way that they seed the film in is rather well done. I mean, again, it's a triumph of effects, really, isn't it? The Ark, it's done very, very well. There's a sense of scale. We get a different kind of, and that's why the cotton wool's there, I guess, because it's another jungle, but it has to be a jungle that feels different from the jungle that is in the spaceship, because you don't want to feel it's got to give you a different sense of place, even largely using the same materials, which is, I guess, why we get the cotton wool, which is shorthand for alien jungle. So again, Barry Newbury has done a very good job there. I think Barry Newbury will be hard-pressed not to be mentioned in Dispatches, and indeed as one of the 5 things. But when, see, it's a tactical game, this, when would Mark choose Barry Newbury or the set design? And the set design allows us, here there's an even better shot in the next episode, which in terms of how the scale works. But I thought this one was good when we had that admittedly far too long sequence of them just sort of sitting there, not quite sure what to do, and then getting out. But they get out of the interior of the ship and come straight into the outside and into the jungle, and again without too much ceremony, so you just accept it. And it's the subtlety with which everything is done in terms of some of the way that it puts scale on the screen that I think a lot of other directors and productions would have been a bit more self-conscious about, and they'd have had 1 or 2 shots like that in order to then say, well, that'll do for the rest of the episode, which is all going to take place in a cupboard. Whereas this seeds all that stuff in throughout, so it means it's consistently, we get to feast our eyes on a consistently, fabulous set of visuals. The landscape, I think, is much huger than we expect. So. I mean, I do like for, I mean, I suppose I have to account for the fact that I've said how this story is extremely underrated, and we have the issue that the monoids have the slaves, if you like, have turned, and I know some people read this as a sort of colonial sea. If you leave them to their own devices, they become the bad guys. You can sort of say, well, we did kind of treat them badly, and the story does say that, you didn't treat them very well, so who can blame them? So I don't think it's that reading of going, oh, I see, savages, they behave in a certain way. I don't think that's the implication. I don't think the implication is that sort of colonialist, and we have to be careful lest people who are not like us behave in ways that we wouldn't because we're civilized. I think it makes the point that we weren't actually all that great when the monoids came and joined us. I like the fact that, and actually the indigenous people here, the Refusians, are the ones who are nice and welcoming, and although they have just mashed the spaceship to bits, but they're the ones who are kind of better than everybody. So, and they bring with them invisible effects, which I do like. But there's that issue which I can kind of get over, and I understand people who want to look for. Or who are primed to look for things that are slightly worrisome in the past about how we present our culture, and certainly in when we juxtapose it with others. And I understand that is a concern, and we have to be we have to be watchful about that, lest we let a sort of colonial narrative go unpunished. But I also think there's a keenness to punish sometimes where we should just go, no, I think it was just an interesting story where they decided to have some lizard people. And I quite think it's an interesting dynamic that we leave Earth with these lizard people, and, you know, the dynamic shifts, and, you know, how does cooperation between the species work? And it's not always going to be easy, and sometimes we'll be good and sometimes they'll be good, and sometimes things will be difficult and we'll need a third-party arbitration. I think that's all legitimate without being too sort of Western-centric, if you like. But what in space is it, or where in space have you come from, is a gloriously shit line, and one of the most gloriously terrible lines in all of Doctor Who, and yet I love it for its naivety. I have to say, I don't think Brian Wright delivers it particularly well either, but what's he supposed to do? Where in space have you come from, or whatever it is. But it is gloriously naff in a way that Doctor Who is not as gloriously naff as you would sometimes think. Certainly not in that kind of way, in that kind of B-movie, sci-fi, very naive sort of way. But it is beautifully, blissfully naive, as is the security kitchen, which I adore. I've got one. I have a security kitchen in my house. The denizens of Patreonville will know this. I have various plaques on various places. Some of them aren't very interesting. The hallway is called Liberty Hall. I got these plaques. I bought them off eBay. You know, they do them for you, especially they didn't cost very much at all. I have the master bedroom. That's a bit boring. We have a little outbuilding called Terence Lodge, and but my favourite is the landing, which is called Dinsdale Landing. But we do also have a security kitchen. So, and the old living room is actually called Tim, which has got nothing to do with anything. It's just, it used to be called, it was going to be called the back room, but then we realised we were having, the whole reason for getting the house was we could do an extension to it and make it open plan so it could fit wheelchairs, which most houses can't. You put a wheelchair in a living room and the room is full. So we needed somewhere we could open out. So we said, well, we can't get used to calling this the back room, because it's not going to be back room soon. It's going to be the front of the back room. So we just call it Tim. She says, what's a good name for it? I said Tim, and it stuck. We even had the builders going, we're going to store all the spare bits of wood in Tim, if that's all right. I love the fact that Tim has stuck. Right. Anyway, that's what we do in our house, and I don't care. It's a lovely little thing that's just for us, which probably sounds stupid or even consciously eccentric in an annoying way, but actually it wasn't. It all sort of came sort of rather organically. Anyway, doesn't matter. Doctor Who the Ark is what matters. So let us return, as the episode is called, to the Ark and choose our favourite thing. I'm going to choose the space potatoes. I think they are emblematic of the casual way with which this production goes above and beyond the call of duty, and the fact that it does it in a way that is so undemonstrative, I think is again a good example of Michael Imerson's approach to things. So it's the kind of director getting in again, but it is the effects squad as well. But I'd also tie that in with some of the invisible effects and in fact some of those backdrops and just the little bits of attention to detail and the way that they aren't presented as ta-da, but are in fact just very casually deployed. And they don't need to be there, and yet they are. So I am choosing my favourite thing for episode 3 of The Ark, The Return. I am choosing the space potatoes. I mean, I love saying space potatoes as well. But what is Mark Aldridge going to choose? I do hope he chooses the space potatoes. I will be so disappointed if he doesn't. He is going to choose for episode 3. He sent me a lovely video. And let's see. You can see what he looks like on Patreon. I guess I will put the videos up on there. Yeah, that's one of the things you get if you go to Patreon, is you get to see the videos that I haven't implemented into these largely audio-only releases these days.
So for episode 3, my favourite thing about it is space travel. So we're on an ark, we're in deep space. I love the fact that we get a real sense of this as a bustling sort of, ark, bustling space centre. But what I really love is the effort that goes into the little rocket that they take, the shuttle, to down to the planet Refusius. Anyway, the planet. Let's just go with that. I love little things like the door that opens in a really interesting way and a little step falls out. I think that's so cute and I absolutely love it. And of course it's all the better because it keeps getting stuck. I love that they have painted a backdrop on the sort of shuttle bay so that there are apparently more shuttles there. And they do this again later. So they do this, I think in the last episode when a shuttle lands. Of course, they've only got one full-size prop. So they do this lovely forced perspective thing of where a smaller one sort of hovers closer to the camera like that. So I love that. I love that seeing, especially William Hartnell, going and doing things in space and, you know, flying in space shuttles and exploring alien worlds and just being this really confident sort of traveller. But you know, the ambition of it, again, it's not just, oh, you know, here are some flats and a couple of interesting shaped doors. I really love the fact that we get a good sense of space travel here, including, of course, the death of Earth, which is like, given 30 seconds or so, it's given a nice bit of high drama, and then you're like, oh, okay, we really are in the far future. So that is my favourite thing for episode 3.
Yes, space. I so thought I had a split second of bliss then, because did you hear him? He said, my favourite thing about this episode is space. And I thought, he's going to say potatoes. He's not only going to choose the same thing, he's going to phrase it in the same way that I did. He's going to say space potatoes. Travel. Yes, and I do like the way that the door falls over into a ramp on the shuttle. I'd forgotten to mention that. I got I went down Segwayville alley, so I did what I've just done there. Is got pointless. I got pointless. I used no words to describe nothing interesting when I should have said something interesting. But that happens when you're live. This is as live. It's too expensive to cut the videotape, and I can't go back. But yes, annoyingly, Mark has invoked things like the paintings in the shuttle bay, etc., which you know would tie in with what you might say about the sets and about Barry Newbury. But he also invoked what could well have been my favourite thing about the next episode, which is that forced perspective shot, which is absolutely stunning and another example of Imeson's ambition. But it does again sort of tie in with what Barry Newbury's job is as well in terms of the design and the size and shape of the sets. But anyway, that's a problem for next week, because that may well have been my favourite thing for next week is that forced perspective shot that we see, because it's a stunner. But I do like seeing Hartnell in space, as you say. We're used to seeing him in historical stories or in a certain type of space, and this just feels a little bit different. And as Mark says, and I think that's a very good description, you know, a couple of flats and interesting doorways is often what we get for space, you know, or a different door handle or a different type of pen or piece of paper. This, I think, commits everywhere, except obviously for the Refusion's castle, but that is cleverly written for them to go, well, we're trying to make something like what you'd want to live in as Earthlings, and so they do kind of get away with that. But it means then the spaceship can look like a spaceship, the jungle like a jungle, and the Refusion's castle slightly more recognisable if you know an alien's attempt to create something that futuristic humans might like. So the fact that it looks a little bit old-fashioned, we can say, well, that's because they've got it wrong, because they don't know. So it's cleverly worked out. But yeah, space travel, it is about the imagination, how far forward in the future it is. The fact that we see the shuttle go, the fact that the shuttle has shuttle bays and it has those doors and there's thought gone to getting back and forth and all of that. It is unusual. It is ambitious. It is very, very well rendered for the most part. So I accept space travel. I was a little bit more down to earth with my love of space potatoes. But that is okay. It is still 2-1 to me. There's 2 things to go. So it's Mark's thing for episode 4 and his extra favourite thing. So I have 2 opportunities and I only have to get one of them right to win. And I have won so rarely. I won with the Sensorites, another Hartnell, and I won with Love and Monsters. I got close with the Tribe of Gum, or whatever we call that. Let's see how we do when we come to the final part of the arc, which which we will see. The bomb. Will I succeed or will I bomb next time? But for now, I suppose I should just abandon you. No, I'm not going to abandon you. I'm just going to go over there. I forgot to mention that, didn't I? I mentioned the what in space and the security kitchen, but the no, I didn't. That's quite Keys of Marinus. Aidan does that in Keys of Marinus, doesn't he, as well? He goes, what do you mean? No, you've got it wrong. It was me, essentially. I love when villains give themselves away. That is the sort of ultimate in naff, and there's something extra naff about it being a one-eyed zippy George mashup. Anyway, no, I'm going now. So actually, bye. But I hope you've been in a happy time and place here. I've been absolutely ecstatic to be on the planet Refusis with the very stupid Monoid 2, the thickest alien yet to have been encountered in Doctor Who, and that is worthy of some sort of an award. Thanks very much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock, and my special guest, Mark Aldridge, who you can find on Blue Sky. I'm grateful to Mark and to the patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include David Spencer, Matthew Speddings, Joey Stephen, David Spofford, Chris Stokes, Adam Stone, Mark Swan, Matthew Tate, Dr. Gary Thomas, Richard Thomas, Jason Thompson, Sabrina Tirabassi, David Trainier, Sidney Trowett, Jim Drenowden, Fanman Sang, John Turner, Lee Wakeley, Gary Wales, Jeff Walker, Steve Walker, Alistair Wallace, Craig Wallace, Gavin Ware, Peter Ware, Stephen Waters, Kevin West, Rich Wiggins, David James Wilson, Chris Williams, Mr. Withit, Stephen Witowski, Lee Wood, David Workman, Alan Wright, Mark Wright, Scott Burdett, Olivia Hayden, David Nichol, Garth Maker, Lee Coburn, William Lee, Ian Bradley, Damien McGee, Noel Reed Jr., William Remmers, Nigel Sharp, and Mel Jones. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. If you would like your name read out on the credits, that is one of the joys of being a citizen of Patreonville. You can access that hallowed location by going to patreon.com/Toby Haydock, where for as little as £3 a month you get your name read out every now and again. More the higher tiers you go up. Everything else is available at the lowest tier, £3 a month. But you get more mentions if you go up the tiers, which go up to as high as you'd like. You can pay me £1 million a month if you like. But you get advance releases, you get bonus releases, you get exclusive content, and you get pictures of my dog, and you can do back and forth and contact me, and we can have chats and this sort of thing. It's nice. It's a nice place to hang out. Patreon.com/Toby Haydock. You can also support these by going to Ko-fi.com/Toby Haydock. There's no bonuses to doing that, but also no monthly commitment, and it's just a way of, throwing a few coppers into the hat of the busker you're walking past if you quite like the sound of the song that he's singing, or you take pity on him. But you can support these in other ways too, by liking, subscribing, giving 5-star reviews wherever you find them, and perhaps a few lines as well to entice people to give these a listen. But spread the word. Word of mouth is also great. Anything that gets these out there makes the effort worthwhile. I'm on social media. It's a help to freelance entertainers. That's an awful word, isn't it? I'm an entertainer, like me, but that's what I hope to be. I hope to be entertaining, and that's what I put my efforts into. And sometimes entertainment is just pointing out what you might have seen that actor in before. Oh, God. Some people learn to juggle. Some people become elite sports people. Some people go, you know that man? You saw him in that. Well, if that's your thing, I'm on Twitter at Toby Haydock and at Haydock Podcasts. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Instagram at Toby.Haydock. I have a Facebook page and I have a YouTube channel if you could like and subscribe and support that. It all just helps. And sometimes it can be the difference between me getting a proper job or not. The social media presence now actually does make a difference when people are casting things or looking to book people for shows. So all that stuff really helps. I wish to God it didn't, but it does. So, Yeah, it says we're trying to eat well, you see. So that's why I had a sausage roll without sausage or roll. But actually, the it's those rice paper Chinese rice, and you put them in boiling water, and you usually use them for sort of wraps, see-through wraps, Chinese, wonton, those sorts of things. But if you coat them in a mixture of water and chickpea flour, I think she's thrown some dried cumin and other bits and bobs and garlic powder and onion powder in as well. It does, if you then cook it in the oven, create a sort of pastry kind of thing. Now, I haven't looked to see if it has fewer calories than pastry, because this is the whole point of it. And I think sometimes we lose track of this when we're replacing, a carb or something with something else that is a stand-in, and you replace it with something that's not as good and actually doesn't save you any carbs or any calories. But we're trying to we follow a lady called Broccoli Mum on Instagram, and she has all sorts of cheats for making cheese sauce with tofu and nutritional yeast and all that sort of thing. And I died a little inside when I said that out loud. But that is what happens when you go past 50 and you're trying all sorts of different ways that aren't going to the gym 3 times a week and stopping eating sweets, which I think would probably be all I needed to do. But we've decided to go the long route. We've decided to take 700 years getting there with the help of some lizards. So anyway, I'm going to go and see. But unfortunately, that chickpea water thing, it does make a bit of a gloopy mess. So I'm going to see what the kitchen is like, and I suspect the word security kitchen will be slathered with some sort of viscous non-pastry stand-in that is a beggar to clean. So I might take my heat prod and do away with her. You heard it here first.